From Informa Tech Target, I'm Beth Pariseau, and this is IT Ops Query. This podcast distills the signal from the noise about enterprise software development and platform engineering. Each week, we'll talk to expert guests about the latest tech industry news and trends that engineering and IT leaders need to know. Don't forget to subscribe to IT Ops Query for more conversations on AI and the future of the enterprise digital workspace. Hello, and welcome to another on-location episode of IT Ops Query. I'm here with Bob Killen of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF, which is putting on the event we're attending here this week in Atlanta, KubeCon and CloudNativeCon North America 2025. Bob has worked as a senior technical program manager at the CNCF since June 2024, focused on improving project governance processes and bringing end users and maintainers together in the community. Before that, he worked as a senior program manager in Google's open source programs office and as a programmer and analyst at the University of Michigan. Since 2017, Bob has been a contributor to and leader of CNCF projects, including the Kubernetes Steering Committee and the Contributor Experience Special Interest Group. Thanks for joining us, Bob.
Happy to be here.
So, the CNCF is publicizing a couple of recent survey reports this week, including a report with Slashdata, the 2025 State of Cloud Native Development report on how developers are using cloud native technologies. So, what are some of the highlights there?
I think the big thing is that we see 58% of backend developers consider themselves cloud native. We're also now at, I believe it's 15.6 million cloud native developers,
Wow.
a very large increase over the years.
Right.
And a large reason for this is that cloud native has become more accessible to a larger set of users. There's a lot of people that it's no longer you have to know what a container or you have to know what Kubernetes is. There's a lot of things like internal development platforms, a whole series of new CNCF tools that have made it much easier to consume.
What does it mean when a developer considers themselves cloud native? How do you define that?
Well, that's been the kind of like interesting thing that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Before, it used to be much more back-end engineers, but now like people are able to consume these things and are using them without having to like directly interface them. But because they're still consuming them under the hood, they're considering themselves cloud native developers. And it's made a lot more, there's been a lot of advancements in making sort of developer experience better, more things like Backstage, which has made it very easy for people to create self-service portals for their teams. And so they can all consume the cloud native sort of experience without having to get down to the leads.
Right. And so the report found hybrid cloud usage has increased to 32% from 22% in 2021. What do you think is driving that?
I think a big part of it is it's gotten easier to burst out to the cloud. And especially with AI, ML, and more job-focused workloads where you don't necessarily have to have a lot of interconnected services that work with each other, it's easier to like burst out and consume a portion of cloud resources while you have the majority of your workload, say, on-prem.
Okay. And so then there's also the Technology Radar report, also released this week, surveying developers about AI and ML tools. Speaking of AI and ML, which of course we're legally and contractually obligated to mention in 2025. So what are some of the highlights there?
The big thing has been, I would say, like what people are classifying as mature, even though it's such a for agentic systems and things like that, even though it's so new to the ecosystem, we do have people that are using very young projects in production successfully,
Huh.
which honestly surprised me a good amount.
Okay.
The other thing that we're seeing is like more people are adopting things like Airflow and Metaflow to help scale out and consume more resources
Yeah.
across like clouds, across providers and things like that, mostly because it provides a good interface for it.
Okay. What are some of those young tools that they're using?
So we have things like the MCP,
Yeah.
the new like agent A2A, agent to agent like, protocols and things like that that are coming out. We have the agent gateway. There's a couple others that I forget off the top of my head or in the report, but a lot of them they're being used heavily in production by the big providers.
Right.
And people are definitely starting to adopt more of them for their own sort of like on-prem workloads or their own private workloads.
Right. Things are moving so fast.
Yeah, it truly is the wild, wild west
It,
of
yeah.
the world right now.
So meanwhile, that report Only 41% of professional AI developers consider themselves cloud native. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of them are consuming sort of SaaS type services
Mm,
where the SaaS service itself is
right.
running on a cloud native platform.
Okay.
I know several big vendors that all have their ML platforms based off Kubernetes under the hood,
Mhm.
but for a lot of the consumers, they don't have to interact with that.
Yeah,
They see an API endpoint.
right.
And a lot of the AI developers are coming from the data science world where they're used to interacting with libraries, and the middle part goes out and consumes the service
Yeah.
in an HPC cluster. Now it's a Kubernetes cluster,
Mhm.
and they are cloud native without realizing they're cloud native.
Right. So, per your mandate at CNCF to bring maintainers and users together, and I would assume that the users here mainly refers to those platform engineers behind the scenes that are shielding all this complexity from developers and bringing cloud native and AI technologies together. How do you think that cloud native infrastructure will evolve alongside AI, and what can the community do to better support those platform engineers running AI workloads?
So it is evolving, like, right now as we speak, with things like dynamic resource
Yep.
allocation in Kubernetes to make access to, like, specific hardware that accelerates
Mm.
ML workloads
Mhm.
more of a thing. But the big thing that we've seen in terms of making it more accessible, and a repeated sort of pattern that has been seen in Kubernetes and the cloud native ecosystem itself, is you usually wind up with a whole suite of different tools that are trying to do the same thing,
Mm.
are doing fundamentally the same thing as, like, part of them.
Mhm.
And over time, what winds up happening is those primitives will be brought into they'll move into the lower part of the system
Mhm.
where Kubernetes will integrate some of those components. And by removing all the different implementations that some might be perform, some might have a lot of limitations,
Mm.
and by bringing that into the system itself, it lets the higher end developers just focus on their differentiation
Yeah.
or the things that make that easy to consume for users.
Right. So for the platform engineers doing that dirty work behind the scenes, are there improvements to, say, portability between clouds and on premises that could be introduced? Or is there something along the lines of DRA that's coming down the pike for further development in Kubernetes?
So there is, well, first, the sort of the value prop of Kubernetes has been portability.
Okay.
And, it lets you interface with one guaranteed set of APIs.
Mm.
Whereas if you were having to do something on-prem, you'd have to manage that your own way.
Mhm.
Versus Amazon, you'd have to learn
Mm.
like their language, their IAM, and
Mhm.
all their stuff like that. Similar thing like Google. Now you can just develop right for Kubernetes.
Mhm.
And when it comes to a lot of the AI workloads and the AI artifacts, we're seeing a shift where a lot of them are adopting sort of some of the fundamentals of cloud native, of using like container images, OCI artifacts, OCI
Mm.
registries, because a lot of the portability issues
Mm.
and things like supply chain security issues have been resolved or have solid methods in the cloud native world,
Mm.
but aren't yet in AI. So by adopting those, it not only makes it easier for your platform engineers and the people that are very experienced and used to those types of workloads,
Mhm.
it also just brings with it a whole slew of additional features like that supply chain security thing I commented on.
Yeah, there's also things that were discussed last year, which at the time agents weren't even on the radar, but DRA was one of them. So that's here now. But then we're already moving on to agent-based concerns. And last year there was discussion about Kubernetes federation and vertical pod autoscaling and those areas that, some of the most sophisticated big companies with
Yeah.
a lot of IT skills in-house can do, but that those weren't considered quite as accessible last year. Has anything changed in the last year on those lines that
Absolutely.
Okay.
There's been a lot of advancements with, say, Q or
Yeah.
KQ, what depending on how you want to
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah.
it. That's gotten a lot easier to consume. There's been several other applications and advancements that have made things easier to consume.
Mm.
We're seeing other things happen in the careers like job API
Mm.
and things like leader worker set,
Okay.
which is another sort of job type that is aligned with much more of the AIML style workloads
Okay.
that are making it easier for people to consume and use.
So how are those better suited to AI and ML, the leader worker set?
So you have in a lot of AI workloads and This even goes back to the old days of HPC,
Yeah.
where you have, well, it's one of those, you need to schedule workloads to run at the exact same time, or like
Uh,
you need to wait and make sure that you don't start the job
Yep.
until a certain number of nodes or pods are available.
Mhm.
That's called like gang scheduling,
Okay.
where we're going to schedule these things at the same time.
Right.
And the reasons for that can be either you need to wait for all the resources to be available so that your
Yeah.
leader can federate the job to those
Right.
nodes, or in some cases, those nodes might be sharing memory
Mm.
via a InfiniBand backend or
Mm.
something like that,
Mhm.
where you need to wait for that pool of
Yeah.
memory to be available across all the nodes.
Right.
Or in some of the cases, GPUs, and waiting for n number of GPUs to be available before you can schedule the
Right.
workload.
Right. What about the job API? How does that help?
So the job API is the fundamental that a lot of this stuff,
Mm.
uses, and
Mhm.
so they've added more batch-oriented jobs directly in there in more primitives. Like, this is somewhat like of an older feature that was developed a couple of years ago,
Mhm.
but, like, a common one is having a number
Mm.
associated with each pod,
Ah, okay.
where you can tell each one and map to, you're gonna consume this part of
Mm.
a data set,
Mm.
number 2 is gonna consume this part of a data set,
Mhm.
and you can break it down well and combine it, and it's a lot of lower primitive stuff has gotten that required a lot more management on the, like, platform engineer,
Mm.
whoever side, or the library is now just handled natively by Kubernetes.
And then Q, can you tell me a little refresh my memory? I heard about Q last year, but I need an update. What's new there?
So they've been expanding more into the multi-cluster in terms of like scheduling,
Yeah.
things like that,
Yeah, yeah.
which I can tell you has been a huge pain point for years. Like,
Sure.
I literally have a presentation I gave in 2017
Uh-huh.
where I talked about the problems of multi-cluster scheduling,
Yeah.
and now most of those issues have all been resolved.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because last year that was a big topic of
Yep.
discussion, and also moving workloads between clusters, whether they're on different clouds or not.
Yep.
Is that something Q helps with too?
I don't know off the top of my head. I'd
Okay.
have to go back and look
Alright.
into it,
Right.
but it should at least be able to like restart that one job.
Yeah.
I know that there's some stuff with checkpoint restore currently happening or currently being
Mm.
worked on,
Mhm.
where it's the old school vMotion and VM,
Yeah, yeah.
where it could move the one
Right.
workload to another node
Right.
without having to restart it.
Mhm.
So I know there's some stuff going on there,
Okay.
but I don't know. I don't recall how
Right.
the progress on it at the moment.
So, are there other areas that are on that next frontier, so to speak? The keynote included Agent Gateway and Agent Registry from Solo.io along with their K agent. Things are afoot for agent support,
Yep.
but what else is coming down the pike?
I think, like, right now, we are certainly seeing a lot of people exploding and just consuming as much resources as they can get,
Yeah.
and we are starting to see the hints of people starting to care a lot more about, I'll say, like, the cost of running things. So it
Uh-huh.
was in
Yeah.
the early days of AI, I'd still say it's here today, like,
Mm.
it's very been a throw money at the wall type
Yeah.
situation, but now there's a lot more in terms of, or what's coming in the pipes is a lot more towards optimizing those work and making sure that you're getting the most for your dollar,
Right.
or your core runtime type things.
So, what's going on in the community around those efforts?
There's been more around, like, exposing primitives,
Uh,
and, like, it's sort of like fundamentally those types of workloads are fundamentally different
yeah.
than the same, like, classic web application,
Okay.
and so there's been more sort of profiles being developed and things like that to help with managing those, or, like,
Mm.
if a job isn't consuming a GPU, this is actually more for on-prem. You
Right.
usually want your hardware to be at 100% all the time,
Right.
and so you now have queues and backfills.
Yeah.
If a job isn't using a resource
Uh-huh.
or is using less of a resource, another job can
Yeah.
start consuming it
Mhm.
immediately.
Mhm. Yeah. And speaking of on premises, there's a lot of back to the future happening right now with AI. And you have a background in HPC. There are also some cloud native, even infrastructure platform engineers, SREs used to operating in public clouds that have to manage hardware again. How are you seeing the end user community kind of handling that transition?
Some of the stuff that I've seen is now the nodes are essentially booting to minimum viable Kubernetes. What we don't want the host OS to have anything. We just want it to basically be spin up, become a node, and expose what hardware it has. And a lot of times this is like an ephemeral node or a node with just a local cache of like NVMe or something.
Right.
But it is there's a lot less of the Ansible or Chef Puppet type managing the nodes themselves.
Right.
And now it's just you have the standard template. It spins up, becomes a node, and it just starts the resources just start being consumed.
Is that being done with infrastructure as code tools? Or
Um,
how is that?
so like some of the times they'll have like a Pixie server.
Okay.
Like there's a project like Tinkerbell which
Ah,
helps
yeah.
manage this, and there's like there's container focused operating systems like Flatcar, which is like actually what we ran our Kubernetes clusters on back at the University of Michigan, because it has like what's known as like an AB partition and update model.
Okay.
So it made it seamless for us to basically do a rolling update
Ah,
of our nodes. Our
right.
nodes weren't doing the diskless Pixie booting.
Uh-huh.
We actually had to provision them,
Mhm.
but that made it significantly easier for us to manage.
So much going on.
Yeah, I barely can't keep it straight.
I know, yeah, it's really tough. So is there anything else happening with the survey reports or during the show this week that people should know about?
I think the big thing is in the developer survey, like when you look at the results of like container and Kubernetes usage, it looks like it's going down.
Huh.
But the reason for that goes back to we are now have a much larger audience, and a much larger audience don't know that they're actually consuming Kubernetes
Oh.
or consuming cloud native technology.
Huh.
So it's now getting harder. This is kind of like the reset of who considers themselves a backend developer.
Right.
So the numbers of who's consuming containers and Kubernetes and the other cloud native technologies, because like it's harder for us to tease out who is an actual backend developer because more people previously backend developers were the people that were doing much more of the platform management.
Right.
And now, since we have all these other people that are developers that are consuming it, they're lumped into, they consider themselves backend developers because they are consuming this stuff.
Right.
They just don't know it.
Huh.
So that's been the interesting trend that I've seen.
Yeah. What are the implications of that, do you think, for the community?
So there's been like a bit of a pendulum with like DevOps, where for a while it was like you want the developers and operations to be like close together. But now we're seeing that sort of split apart.
Yeah.
And this is, again, it's like a pendulum.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to sit our operations people with our developers.
Right.
And now because of platform engineering and all those internal development platforms, we're seeing that split where the classic backend developers are now basically enforcing all the cluster best practices, the application best practices, and the developers are just consuming those things through the internal development platforms like Backstage.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
It's been interesting.
it sure has. Interesting times, as they say. So, well, it's always a hectic, busy show. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat. And thank you for your insights.
Yeah, thank you. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to IT Ops Query. To learn more about enterprise software development and platform engineering, explore our content on Informa Tech Target sites. Find us on YouTube at our channel, Ion Tech. Subscribe to our podcast to receive the latest episodes as they drop. And if you liked what you heard today, give us a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. Thank you for joining us.